How does China threaten American human rights, democracy, and national security? And what are we doing to stop them? NTD's Iris Tao brings us more from a roundtable discussion that was hosted by Senator Rick Scott.
That Communist China has chosen, they've chosen to be our enemy, and that we have entered into a new Cold War with Beijing.
At a roundtable on Tuesday, Senator Rick Scott and a wide array of experts shed light on how Beijing threatens U.S. national security, economy, and human rights.
This zero-sum game is evident in Xi's willingness to imprison political dissidents, destroy democracy in Hong Kong, and engage in systematic genocide of the Uyghur people in decades-long persecution against Christians, Tibetans, and members of Falun Gong.
And the regime's influence is not only felt within its borders.
But if you keep talking about these issues, then you're not going to get another contract. And that is my agent said that to me.
And as Cantor Freedom, a former NBA player and an outspoken critic of China's human rights record, says Beijing's exporting its censorship through its economic influence here.
If your mother or if your sister or your wife was in those concentration camps and getting tortured and raped every day, would you still act the same way? Would you still remain silent? And
there was a special guest present. He's not an expert or an activist, but he's living through what the regime did to his family.
My mom, Ji Yunzhi, a Falun Gong practitioner, died 9 days ago due to the persecution.
Simon Zhang's mom was a practitioner of the spiritual practice Falun Gong. She was arrested in China right before the Beijing Winter Olympics in February and later tortured in detention.
My mother is just one of the confirmed deaths of 4,697 Falun Gong practitioners during the ongoing persecution. She was one of the millions of practitioners sent to forced labor camps or who've been tortured and abused.
And Senator Rick Scott on if the U.S. should recognize such persecution as genocide.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's a genocide what they're doing. What they're doing to the Uyghurs, what they're doing to Tibetans, what they're doing to Christians, what they're doing to Falun Gong practitioners. It's clearly genocide.
Reporting in Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
And on Tuesday, Senator Marco Rubio spoke at the Heritage Foundation. He said the biggest threat to America is Communist China. For the past 2 decades, there was a belief that free trade would change China. It did not. As America's economy became interconnected with Communist China, Rubio says U.S. interests were not protected.
For over 2 decades, China methodically undermined our economic strength by stealing our critical technology, our manufacturing capacity, our jobs. We did nothing while they destroyed our social cohesion by luring away those jobs.
Senator Rubio said that the communist regime even influenced American companies hoping to access the Chinese market.
It was American companies that lobbied to defeat, to stop, to impede my bill to block imports made with Uyghur slave labor in China.
He said that the U.S. needs to shore up its own manufacturing, pointing out the dangers of relying on China for critical supply chain needs.
Go forward a few years, and we're in some sort of conflict with China. Think about what would happen if they decided, okay, we're just going to cut you off of everything. Sports equipment for sure, cut you off of iPhones. We're going to cut you off of rare earth minerals because you'll need those for the technology that powers your weapons systems.
Senator Rubio said there is a solution, but it requires unity among not just political parties, but also businesses. He calls for a whole-of-society effort to prevail. House GOP leader Kevin McCarthy recently set up a China task force team, and he appointed Congressman Michael McCaul to lead it. The objective of the task force is to hold China accountable and to make sure the communist nation does not surpass the United States in critical national security areas. Congressman McCaul is ranking member of the House Foreign Relations Committee and heads the China Task Force. We had a chance to sit down with the congressman. Congressman Michael McCaul, thank you for joining us in the Capitol Report.
Thanks, Steve.
Congressman, I'd like to ask you about China, particularly their cyber capabilities. When it comes to China's ability to conduct a cyber attack, how advanced are they, and should it be a major concern to the United States?
Very advanced, very different from Russia. Their attacks are more theft of intellectual property, espionage. For instance, they broke into OPM, stole 23 million security clearances, including mine. And the problem is that there are no consequences when they do this. And the Russians, of course, attacked Colonial Pipeline. They like to do more destructive attacks on critical infrastructures. This shows how there are no international rules of the road when it comes to cyber, and we need to have consequences. So when there's attribution, that means when you find out who the bad actor is, in the international space, we have to develop a new paradigm of consequences.
So, Congressman, when it comes to the virus, it's waning in our country, thankfully, and starting to recede a bit. However, in China, we're starting to see an uptick in the virus. From day one, the Chinese Communist Party has not been open, has not been transparent. As the world continues to open up, how important is it to demand transparency from China?
And people ask me that all the time, like, we're not going to change the past, but it's important we have transparency to change the future. We don't want this to happen again. And I do think there's an accountability issue here. The Democrats have been loath to have any hearings or investigations on this. I released my Origins of COVID-19 report that we translated into Mandarin, got it through the firewall into mainland China. It went viral. The Chinese people, the government responded very strongly, denouncing me and the China Task Force because they fear their own people more than anything if they know the truth. I think our report was very factual, like a prosecutor would lay a case out that's very probable it was leaked out of a BL2 lab with gain-of-function research that was funded by NIH to Peter Daszak. When we get the majority, we will have subpoena power, and we want to get to the bottom of what happened. Not to be vengeful, but we need to know the truth about what happened that has killed millions of people around the world and Americans as well, to first and foremost ensure it just never happens again.
Congressman, the Senate has been discussing the China competition bill. Where do you guys stand on it in the House as of now?
Well, the bill I introduced is the Chips for America Act, and it was basically an idea I got from Secretary Pompeo, National Security Advisor O'Brien, Wilbur Ross, to try to pull manufacturing of semiconductor chips advanced into the United States where they're not vulnerable from Chinese espionage. That only creates jobs and manufacturing in the United States, but also protects our advanced chips for everything from your iPhone to your most advanced weapon systems in the United States. Now that's a good part of this. And I think the research and development to compete with China is very good. What was really bad is that Pelosi at the last minute threw together in the darkness of the night out of her office a poison pill bill that actually put $8 billion that could go to China, to the Xinjiang province, to use slave labor to produce solar panels and batteries. I don't think the U.S. taxpayer wants to pay for that. So we're going into a conference committee. My goal is to strip out all the poison pills so we can go forward with what's going to be truly a competitive measure against China on artificial intelligence, quantum computing, 5G, and also militarily. How can we compete better with China? We have to compete, otherwise we're going to lose this global competition.
And do you expect the bill to be finalized this year?
Yes, we'll go into in fact, they're naming the conferees. I will be one of them. And I hope within the next month or two we can come to a resolution.
Congressman Michael McCall, thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
The Pentagon is planning to accelerate production of missiles as it continues to send weapons to Ukraine. These new weapons will go toward refilling the Defense Department's depleted stock. Officials say it is ramping up production of Stinger anti-air missiles and Javelin anti-tank missiles. Ukraine has requested the U.S. deliver 1,000 of these weapons daily. The U.S. and other NATO members have already sent tens of thousands of missiles to help Ukraine fight off the Russian invasion. The events that took place on January 6, 2021 at the United States Capitol have morphed into a political lightning rod that even many Republicans have been reluctant to touch. One member of Congress who has been speaking openly about that day is Texas Representative Louis Gohmert. We asked him about it. Here's a look. Congressman Louis Gohmert, thank you for joining us again on the Capitol Report.
Certainly.
Now, Congressman, when you see some of these videos, most of the videos we've seen of people hanging off the buildings and, That was really the primary focus. But also, if you search hard enough, there's other videos that show that at certain points the people were allowed to flow in and things like that. Why do you think that this has become so politicized, and should this really be a taboo subject, or should it be openly talked about?
Well, you've got Democrats that have been in control of both the House and Senate, and now the White House since January of last year. And so, because the polling appears to indicate Democrats, if we have a fair election without cheating, will no longer have a majority in either house, it appears to be an effort to hold on to power by making it appear that January 6th was, in fact, you've had even President Biden say that it's, you know, the worst attack in American history, worse than Pearl Harbor, worse than 9/11. People have tried to make those comparisons, trying to make it appear much worse than it was. And we still don't know why Pelosi would not allow the National Guard to be there to ensure that the Capitol was not vulnerable. It was as if she wanted that vulnerability.
Can you break that down a little bit? That's a very unknown point. When you
President Trump offered, when he heard that they were concerned about the Capitol, offered to make the National Guard available.
Before that day.
Before January 6th. And, you know, they were told, the person responding on behalf of the Speaker, that they didn't want the National Guard. The optics would not be good. They could have protected that whole thing from ever happening. And clearly, if you look at what Trump said and when the entrance to the Capitol occurred on January 6th, he hadn't even finished his speech. He didn't give a speech to push people to go break into the Capitol. And as a former prosecutor and felony judge, I expect people to be punished for committing crimes. For those who broke into the Capitol, broke things at the Capitol, burglarized the Capitol, were a threat, physical threat to others. I mean, I expect those people to be punished.
You have been very outspoken, specifically for the detainees. Tell us why that is.
As a former prosecutor, former judge, if we're going to have justice in America, we have to follow the Constitution. And it seems to have been tossed by the side when it comes to January 6th. We've had so many of the people that went into the Capitol, or some that were just there, who were charged with obstructing an official session of Congress as a felony. And that's, for many of them, it's the most serious charge they had, which took me back to June of 2016, when most of the Democrats in the House of Representatives obstructed an official session of Congress. We kept trying to go into session, and they obstructed. At one point, grabbing the microphone. Women grabbed it to their breasts and wouldn't let, if you tried to get the microphone, they would scream sexual assault. But if the Department of Justice really wanted to be fair, and they had intentions of prosecuting conservatives, people that were supporters of President Trump, for obstructing an official session of Congress, well, they should have gone after the Democrats who were in the House of Representatives that obstructed an official session of Congress for much longer than those on January 6th did. So this appeared right off the bat to have a very political lean to it. They didn't care about any Democrat ever obstructing Congress. They only went after conservatives.
Congressman Louis Gohmert, thank you.
Well, thank you. Always a pleasure.
Alaska's late Congressman Don Young is lying in state at the U.S. Capitol's Statuary Hall. He is among a select few chosen for this honor. To date, Young was the longest-serving Republican member of Congress in United States history. Young's former colleagues and fellow lawmakers had the opportunity to pay tribute and say their goodbyes this afternoon.
There's been no other person in this chamber that has been loved, feared, and respected more all at the same time.
Young moved to Alaska in 1959, the year it became a state. Before entering politics, he captained a tugboat and ran a shipping operation on the Yukon River. He maintained his mariner's license until his death. Young was 88 years old when he died on a flight back to Alaska earlier this month.